What's going on, Workforce? Brian here.
Chris here.
And today we're actually talking about the state of tanks within the world of Final Fantasy XIV. Chris has got all of his tanks leveled. I was like, what if we tier list the game? We haven't done a tier list in a long time. Chris did a beautiful meme on it back in the day. And but then I was like, well, you don't have all your jobs level. You're leveling healers. So stay tuned to the channel for that. Subscribe, favorite, share for sure. All right, that's fun and all dandy. But I want to talk to you today, Chris, about tanks. Like, what do you feel is the best one? I know you thematically connected to the warrior from the theme of Shadowbringers. Can you talk about that just to give everybody some context?
Yeah, I mean, so in the story of 14, without spoiling anything, the jobs are referenced. You see them in trailers. You see them referenced by various NPCs that you interact with. And for me personally, playing through the story of Shadowbringers, as a warrior, I felt that there were things uniquely targeting me. There were people who played through it as other jobs that felt that it uniquely spoke to them. So obviously that's a perspective thing. I can only play through it the first time, one time. And so warrior really felt special to me, as opposed to, like, as I play through ARR, warrior feels less a part of it. As you know, it just doesn't feel as specific to me. So Shadowbringers felt uniquely for me. I think when we talk about the best tank in 14, going in Endwalker, not knowing what the job changes are now.
Yeah.
Usually there's two groups of people that we're talking about. We're talking about people who've never tanked before and are saying, wow, there's a whole lot of people trying out healer and DPS for the first time. Maybe this is a good excuse to go get those lightning fast tank queues. Mm-hmm. I assume those queues are going to be so fast that when you log in, the queue pops and you haven't even queued yet. Like, I assume the instance is like, you're already late.
You're already here.
Just logged in. We're already at the first boss. Waiting on you now. And so I assume, I'm obviously exaggerating there, but I assume that tanks are going to be heavily in demand from at least 6.0 to 6.1 until people are like, okay, I like Sage or I like Reaper, but I'd like to go back where I came from before. And so there's going to be a lot of new faces. That's group one. Group two is the top end people. What is the best I can do? What is the most I can achieve? What is the most valuable I can be in top end clears, either as brand new clears week one or as farm clears as you get into where you're just clearing the content rapidly. Those two groups of people, I think the tanks speak to very differently. We've talked a lot about on the channel skill floors and skill ceilings. Skill floor being the minimum amount of skill required to do the job validly at all by any definition, and the skill ceiling being the theoretical maximum that can be executed in a particular piece of content. Probably something that nobody ever actually hits. I mean, it is so theoretical, because at that point you have to start asking, are there things you could do to make other people in your party's life better? Are there things you could do to mitigate risk of something that didn't end up happening? Like, it starts to become really theoretical as that skill ceiling, and you have to basically play perfectly. And these tanks are all different. So those are the two categories for me. Are there ones I should be considering?
I think essentially just a fun category, like what feels the best outside of the mindset of whether we're talking about difficulty, like what. And then for you, honestly, a fourth category would be what do you resonate with more outside of like I have a lot of fun playing Gunbreaker, but I resonate more with the Paladin, even though I'm not spending time with it. And that's just for me speaking personally of myself. And so that's just where I was like, this is going to be an interesting topic, because outside of that concept of best, I also want to talk about that. I figure we could kind of go back and forth in the categories, putting them in 1, 2, 3, 4, but then also kind of pivot to like, what do we hope to see with any kind of changes to Endwalker for the not Paladin, but for the tanks themselves as a concept, because Shadowbringers did kind of like simplify tanking and made it more accessible, from when you talk about the skill floor. The skill floor did drop down significantly, and we do see a lot of people having tank anxiety still to this day, but a lot less, because it's more inviting into that. So in regards to, I guess, the skill floor, like if we're going to put, how would you rank your tanks, with 1 being the best, the easiest for new players, and 4 being the most difficult?
So I think Gunbreaker, especially if you're new to the game and you're not used to rotations at all, is the most like you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. It's a lot closer to being a DPS. That Gnashing Fang combo at max level is very long. It's not hard to understand, but it's very long to execute while you're also trying to learn how to do mechanics and keep aggro and manage cooldowns. And like, there's a lot of other things that go into tanking. And so I think I would put it on the highest difficulty from the skill floor standpoint. Next down, I do Dark Knight, but those things were added later. And so they were added when the player base had more skill. So that doesn't bother me. I think both of them actually do a relatively poor job scaling down in scaled content. So it's not something like, well, I'll just get them unlocked at whatever level they unlock, and then I'll go run low level content. For me personally, while they are powerful in that content, I don't think they feel very good. And so I don't think you're getting the essence of them. So I would focus on Warrior and Paladin as your skill floor. I think of the two, Paladin can get by with less of its kit being used. You could take more of its abilities off the bar and still complete the vast majority of casual content in this game. Should you do that? No, you should use as much of the job as you're capable. But as a skill floor, as a minimum, you could get by with Paladin just using Sheltron, Rampart, Reprisal maybe, and like for your defensives, Sheltron being your gauge, and then your physical rotation.
Yeah,
you wouldn't even have to burn mana. You could just be like, oh, I just save mana for if I need clemency. Like, now Paladin mains out there are like, why would you do that? But as the floor, as the bottom, where when you start the instance with a group, you turn tank stance on, and then it says dun dun dun, dun duty complete. Like, you'll get there. As soon as you're comfortable with that, add more. Like, there is way more. Warrior, I think, is a little harder, and mostly the difference between the two, assuming you're going to play them at that way, where you're going to do a 3 or 4 button rotation, use 1 or 2 cooldowns, and then spend the rest of the time focusing on like what the heck is tanking. I would say that when you get into dungeon content, which is like where you're going to start, the AoE rotation of Warrior is a little clumsy because it's a cone attack. If you've never tanked before, that is the only one with a cone attack. Yeah, it's an extra layer of positionality that the Paladin doesn't have.
So the only thing that I would slightly change off your order, because I would say I definitely fall exactly with you with Gunbreaker, Dark Knight, but I would switch out Warrior and Paladin on a controller's perspective, and that's obviously where I come from. From a controller perspective, there's a few things that I really was frustrated by. Same kind of thing with Summoner, where I put a lot of work into my controller guides, more than any other job than the Paladin and the Summoner, to get it to feel good, but it just felt like, just 2 or 3 little tweaks, and this would play out much easier, much more comfortable on a controller. And so from a floor perspective, I'm going to factor in controller players, and I think it was easier for me to do Warrior on controller, hands down. And obviously, I think also Dark Knight and Gunbreaker were easier on a controller. But when we're, again, talking about that base level floor, you bring up very valid points, especially how Dark Knight and Gunbreaker were added in later. I still miss my evasion tank, Dark Knight, back from Heavensward when it first released. They had a skill, we haven't seen it since. Oh, man, Heavensward, dude. What a good time. But it was just, it was such a, like, that was definitely the ceiling for that tank at that time, because you could basically just dodge your way through so much damage, which was just hilarious, unless you're paired up with a white mage, and then they would stun the enemies, and it would totally not work out in your behavior. We now know why they got rid of that, because of that synergy. You wouldn't want a Dark Knight white mage pair. But anyway, back into it. I think and it's really cool to see, because I'm really hoping the fact that the Paladin is on the cover art, that because we had Dark Knight there, that we can kind of see a couple of things, and that overall just we'll get into my changes itself. But I would say the Paladin is a little bit more. It's easier. Like, I agree with that, but if your input is the controller, you're going to sacrifice a lot of damage if you don't make your hands uncomfortable slightly every part, because you have to, because when you want to take it off the floor and raise it up, you're going to have to be a little bit uncomfortable at first, and that's unfortunate. If the enemies are moving, if everybody's standing still, you're going to be fine. But as soon as things start moving around, that's where you're going to start to really feel and want to shift to Warrior, or really any Gunbreaker or Dark Knight at that point.
Right.
Let's go. Let's talk about in a way you rank the floor and the ceiling. Let's talk about fun. Let's talk about.
No, I haven't ranked the ceiling. We haven't talked about the ceiling.
Okay, let's talk about the ceiling then. Sorry,
I think when you go up to the ceiling, I think you mentioned Warrior being the easiest. I think the great thing is at the ceiling, it stays there. Once you're doing Warrior correctly, you kind of got it. Like, there isn't really anything else to add. basically you learn the difference where your infuriate should be used. You learned about using your gap closer as part of your inner release. You realize that upheaval is better DPS than Felcleave, but Felcleave feels better, and you're done. Like managing cooldowns and learning how warrior can be one of the very, very self-sufficient tanks that the healer can go down and a warrior can sometimes finishing the encounter is pretty unique to warrior. Like not totally unique, but it is incredibly good at it. But in most parties, like you're kind of done pretty quick. Once Storm's Eye's up and you're doing things correctly, it just seems to stay up. And you can get it to 100% uptime.
That was a really good change for warriors, though, by the way, like, because it felt like you were getting punished. So just keep it up, and then it refreshes on your AoE rotation.
Yeah, it feels a lot like keeping a Nokian up on a Black Mage, right? If it's falling off, the issue is that it's a reminder you're doing something wrong. It's kind of like that Delibrum Doom mechanic when it first pops up. It's like that probation. It's like, hey, just kind of letting you know, that kind of damage down type moment. So I really like that as a feedback mechanism.
I'm going to kind of pivot that point, though, because one of the things that is interesting in the struggle is the fact that is a dot or a buff. It's a part of those status effects. And I think that those kind of things can be a little bit more easily missed. It's not necessarily feeding it to you. So to kind of just jump ahead in the video slightly is that, if anything else, I would love to see the UI inform the player, like if they have certain buffs as on their rotation that are up, to kind of call that to mind.
I'm so bummed you never liked WoW. Literally, you would just have an add-on for that. And so I'm not actually bragging on WoW. I'm bragging on the add-on community, which we don't have in 14, because you could say, hey, that's something I want. And every other player is going, what are you talking about? Well, the great thing about the add-on community is it's so personalized that if only you want that, then only you download that add-on, and that's okay. And so you can have something called like weak auras that says, hey, when Storm's Eye's not up, that's something I'm really struggling with. I switch jobs a lot, and Storm's Eye always kind of just falls out of my head and I forget about it.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to have a red ring appear around my character when Storm's Eye's not up. And so the moment that pops up, it goes, oh God, I let Storm's Eye. And so it's just a reminder. It's not going to put Storm's Eye back up for you. It only pops, like it's just a reminder. That's just like having a warrior main stand behind you and just tap you on the shoulder. Just, hey, what do you think you need to be doing right now? I'm not even going to call it Storm's Eye. What do you think would be a good idea right now? Storm's Eye?
Yeah, good choice. Monster is saying exactly that he misses weak auras as well from WoW. Anyway, so I was just
yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think next up, I'd probably put Gunbreaker. I'd probably slide into the second seat, because while it is a lot for a new tank, once you're comfortable with the tanking part, the rotation is really done one way. It's really straightforward. It's 1,000,000 buttons long, but it's the same million over and over and over and over.
It's a dance.
The timings are really clean. Mm-hmm. There's a common denominator, so you're not constantly having to shift which ones are falling during which windows. It's easy to manage. It's easy to maintain. When I hop on a Gunbreaker and I haven't been on one in a while, the first pull is nasty, and then the second pull is better, and then every pull for the rest of the day just feels good. Once you settle back in, it's just a rhythm, and it just slides there. And then I would put Dark Knight in third, because it's more of a game of whack-a-mole, a little bit kind of like Dancer, where like you're just you have some priorities and you're doing those. They don't work out exactly the same, but you're, oh, my mana's at cap. Okay, let me beat my mana back. Oh, wait, oh man, I'm not. And so it's a little bit about managing priorities. But if you've got those first two down, it's not that far of a leap. And the last one is Paladin for me. Mm-hmm. When you've got a 21-second Goring Blade that if that falls off, you're clipping it to refresh it. And if you do it too soon, or if it falls off, you're losing DPS on the target. So you have to have that up exactly every 21 seconds, which is weird. And then you've got these other intervals that, off the top of my head, is like 25 and 30 and 90, and just invent a bunch of numbers that don't ever line up with each other. And once every 6 months, there's a perfect eclipse, and all the Paladin abilities feel good to me. And the reason that's frustrating is the moment they're probably your perfect Paladins are like, actually, if you do the math with the global cooldown and spell speed, it works out perfectly. Assuming you're perfect, it's so hard to re-jumpstart it. When there's a phase change, something like E12 or something like that, it's so hard. It feels like my warrior has one of those jumpstart kits on it, and I just turn the key and it just fires up. And you're like, well, the battery died. Oh, we'll just turn the key. It'll take care of it. Mm-hmm. What? Yeah, just turn the key. Then it just fires up, and off we go again. Paladin is a whole lot more like, well, but technically during the intermission, your mana didn't totally recover. And so it's supposed to line up. I think it is. I think all those timings are those weird numbers because it's supposed to line up. But of these 4 tanks, it is the easiest one to get out of alignment when you make a mistake. To me, that's a personal opinion. I think it's the hardest of the 4. I don't think tanking in 14 casual content is hard at all for any of them. But I think Paladin's the hardest.
That's in terms of, I guess, in my list that I feel like I slid right into Dark Knight and Gunbreaker. And maybe that's also because they got, I think, the most amount of work, Gunbreaker being new. So I feel there might be an inherent bias that I have directly with this list right here. But I really struggled with Paladin, and I really struggled with Gunbreaker at first. Once I put some time into it, all of a sudden, you're right. It just kind of, okay, this is what I'm doing. And I really but it did take a little bit because it is a longer combo, especially with but continuation. But like right in that vein, Gunbreaker so freaking fun, Dark Knight so freaking fun. I would rate Paladin in a weird way. Like it's the easiest to get into, and for me, it's a little bit of the hardest one to master. A Warrior is a weird one. Maybe I would probably say, like, if I was putting it with, Paladin being the hardest, I would say following by, and I'm split on Dark Knight and Gunbreaker, so I'll just say Gunbreaker, Dark Knight, and then Warrior, not necessarily giving me all that much grief. Like, I just felt like I understood Warrior very quickly, and to take that into kind of the fun factor, I really would put Warrior down on the bottom of the list, and I would put Dark Knight and I'm between the two, Dark Knight, Gunbreaker. I'll say Dark Knight is my most fun, Gunbreaker, Paladin, and then Warrior. And a lot of that is when I played Warrior, even out of the media tour, I go, yeah, like Warrior was a ton of fun in Stormblood. That's what I mained in Stormblood, but I just didn't think that it either got the love that it needed. It felt like everybody else. And this is here's my bias, guys. Like if you're new to the channel or you haven't heard me say this in a while, the thematics of tactics with the Dark Knight and the Paladin, like immediately we're just like, yes. And then Gunbreaker, just how fast it is, especially with continuation, was absolutely a must have. And then that's where, like with Warrior, and you were like saying you were so thematically connected to the story of it. I'm like, yeah, but have you tried Gunbreaker? Like, have you touched this other one? have you played around with Dark Knight? Like you get Fae, like you get your own little shadow, and it's gonna fight alongside you. Yeah. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah, I still like Warrior. I actually like the simplicity of it because the content itself, we run things a certain number of times, and I like screwing around. Last Tuesday I was running my Deliverum runs with max spell effects, no HUD. And people were like, "How are you doing your rotation?" Because it's a Warrior.
Yeah,
I don't have the timer on inner release, something I can see. So every time I finish a rotation, I'm just pressing inner release every few times to know that in the back of my head. And then when I see my character go, brah, then I just start fell cleaving. And they're like, well, how do you know how to fell cleave? You just, it's my X key. And you just push X. How long?
Until you stop. Yeah.
And in between then, maybe throw an upheaval, throw an onslaught, maybe an infuriate. That way when it ends, you get a bonus one. If you think that's the right one, throw a second one, but you might be wasting gauge. It's hard to say. There's no HUD. And like, I was having a blast. And like, seeing if I could live through Deliverum with no HUD. It does give you your temperature, by the way. That actually pops up. That I was like, man, the moment we get into temperature-based mechanics, I'm going to get wiped off the floor. Those actually appear even in no HUD. But yeah, it's turning up spell effects to the max, by the way, really hard to be melee. Even when you're dressed in a metallic pig suit, I don't know where that guy is. He should be in the middle of my screen. She should. I don't know. She's lost in there. I can't see her.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of fun doing that, and Warrior allows for that. I can't do Gunbreaker like that. I can't do Dark Knight like that. I can't. Paladin's probably doable like that if you have the perfect rotation, but it's not like if you get off and you're like, well, I don't know where I'm at. Well, then you don't know where you're at. Like you're not gonna like Requiescat is gonna require that you're counting in your head. Count. Okay, Confiteor. And I don't have to do that with Warrior. Like if I screw up my inner release window, the job still functions. It's really, really, really easy. And so I just find that really fun. And I find that it lets me focus on other aspects of the content, especially right now where like I'm in parties and it's all sprouts. Been running things and there's sprouts everywhere. So I think from there, that's the one I identify with. It's the one I find the most fun.
Yeah.
I think from there, like I really like Gunbreaker at level cap. But if you were going to make me main one for Endwalker, the moment I feel the need to do a leveling roulette and it sinks me down below 60, it feels awful. I understand it's powerful. Everybody else in the party like, man, this tank's really tearing it up. And it's me on the other side of the keyboard like it doesn't feel good because that Gnashing Fang combo was baked in. It was designed to be at level 60 and above, and everything after that was like, oh yeah, we got to make it work there. And so it doesn't feel good to play things below the level they were introduced. I assume Reaper and Sage all feel the same way below level 70. Honestly, I would rather it be that way. They designed the job to be level 70 and above, introduced to play with people who have already played to level 70, make it fun for that. And if the synced content has to fall by the wayside, I mean, I get it. But as a main, Gunbreaker can't be there. So I think Warrior just feels fun. It just seeing big fell cleaves and decimates, which look like Warrior, which look like Paladin consecrates from WoW, and you're just slamming the ground everywhere. And like, I actually like the cone AoE. Like once you're comfortable with positions, I find it's really fun because it makes me have to wiggle a lot when we get into big pulls. And I like that extra movement instead of like, I just ran into the middle and cast circles everywhere. I actually like that the Dark Knight has that line AoE for that reason. Cause it's like, oh yeah, I did a really good job hitting everybody. Something that just feels good.
Yeah.
I would put probably Warrior first, Dark Knight second, Paladin and Gunbreaker. If you're like, hey, I want you to run on Paladin or Gunbreaker, I'm gonna go, oh, cool. What are we running? So I would probably just say like, okay, let's look at the total content in the game that Brian wants to run. Let's split it down the middle and let's give Paladin everything low level and everything where like maybe we have a healer who's not quite comfortable, although Gunbreaker has plenty of defensives. So that doesn't really matter. And then we'll just give Gunbreaker the rest. That way I get to bounce back and forth. Like I'm going to switch between every instance. Is that okay? That's probably where I fall.
Yeah. So with the last few minutes of our time, now that we are at the 22 minutes later, marking,
we made it.
Yeah, we did it, guys. What would be a change, or like I would say probably one or two, no more than two changes you want to see made to tanking overall in Endwalker?
So as a Warrior main, I want to see Onslaught lean further into being different than the other gap closers. You've clearly made it different, and I don't want them homogenized more than they already are. So in my opinion, what you would do is you would have it cost gauge. And so you would give it basically an unlimited number of charges and have it cost gauge. And what that would do, or give it 3 or 4 or 5 charges, but have it cost gauge. And what that would allow you to do is during your inner release window, it would make it feel a lot more like that Gnashing Fang combo, where you were like, you'd be and have it be right there. And so you'd be trying to weave it in. That would feel really good to me, that you were like, okay, I'm going to go Fell Cleave, Upheaval, Fell Cleave, Onslaught, Fell Cleave, Onslaught, Fell Cleave, Onslaught, Infuriate,
like,
Fell Cleave, Onslaught.
You're that berserk warrior.
Right. Inner release, berserk, just that craziness. And so like, that's a change I would make. Level sync across the whole game, I think, is something that needs to be reevaluated. So I wouldn't worry about when skills unlock, because I think that whole system is something that was really brilliant for its time. And as it's aged, and as we've seen other games try other systems, it's become something that's kind of a pain point. So as a second thing, I would get rid of tank stance. I think there are better and more interesting ways to tackle enmity generation than saying, here's a button that multiplies your enmity by 10 forever. Like that's not
right.
Oh, okay then. And because it works this way, it turns on and off all the time, and so you're going to have to remember in instances to push that button once.
Even if they keep it, I would just say don't turn off the stance when you go into content. Like that's just that throws me. But that overall would be a sync. Like they could update the syncing system. That would end up being a huge benefit. But that you hit the things that I wanted outside. Like Warrior doesn't necessarily like mean specific. It's all in that level sync and that stance, man. Like it's to the point where we say that people freak out. Like how would we do tank swaps? Provoke. Sure. Like those things exist, and it's like
And I think your AoE rotation generates a massive amount of enmity so that you keep the skill floor low. Because in dungeons, which is where people are getting introduced to tanking, they are taught that the AoE rotation works, and they just go in and just blast it down with it. That's where they're comfortable, which gives them the skill set to then pull harder, which gives them the introduction to using things like arm's length, which is incredible. Use it a lot. Using your rampart, using your reprisal, and that's just roll actions. Like that should be on all 4 tanks. Use them all. And so like I think that's an invitation for people to improve, as opposed to just like, you're in the lead. Why? Well, we put this little button on there and then you push it and then you're in the lead. I just think that that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, guys, let us know what you guys think as in terms of our rankings or the jobs, the tanks themselves, and then also be looking on the look for other videos talking about the different roles here in Final Fantasy XIV. Chris, any final thoughts before we wrap today?
No. I mean, we look forward to the discussion down below. I think it's great that, there's people that want to be warriors and there's people that want to be wrong. So, you're definitely welcome to settle on any job as long as it's warrior. It's definitely the best one. And so I look forward to seeing how Endwalker changes tanking. I will be a tank at least through 6.0 and 6.1 because obviously with a handful of people thinking they have the unique idea of being a Sage or a Reaper out of the gate, I have a feeling I'm going to be in need a lot. And that materia early on is going to be pricey, assuming we get 9s and 10s. And so I'll take my adventure and need bonus all day and my instant queues all day. Quite thank you. That'll be fine.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today. Thanks so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Like Chris said, sound off in the comments below. Like, favorite, subscribe, share, all the YouTube, social media stuff. Thanks for being here for Work to Game. My name's Brian.
My name's Chris.
Thanks for being here.
Really, thank you guys.
Yeah, we love you. We'll see you soon. Bye.